And action, and welcome everybody. This is PnP Weekly episode 151. Technically, this is Microsoft 365 PnP Weekly nowadays. Anyway, so confusing. Anyway, so in the PnP Weekly, I always talk about the latest, what's happening in the Microsoft 365 world with news articles from community and from Microsoft, and we typically have a visitor to talk about something related on community or the platform or the products or services from Microsoft or from external community members. And this time we had Paul Bullock from CBS, but he also talks about his upcoming career as he's moving away from CBS, briefly on that call as well. But that's good discussion, which we already had actually, but we're recording this. Now I'm giving it away. We shouldn't be doing this. Now, we're such a professional.
Timelines are really hard, like going in circles.
Anyway, so we already had the discussion, really good discussion related on script gallery. So one of the things that Paul is coordinating is the open source script gallery for Microsoft 365, where we're trying to aggregate the samples. So rather than having every single people having their individual script samples in their repo, which from where nobody finds them, let's have one location where we can aggregate them and then surface them in a based on metadata in an easy way. So it is actually a really cool setup, and Paul is doing absolutely brilliant job on hosting the things and allocating and aggregating stuff as well. Not forgetting about all of the people who contributed, because there's quite a few tens and tens of people who've been already active on that, right?
Absolutely, and I guess so like the whole goal is not for us to take anything away from anybody. It's meant to allow people or help people reach more people with the work that they've already done, and help them, like put them on the stage, and like all the scripts that are shared under their name with their
face
credits.
And details and credits and all of that. Yes,
exactly, right. So it's meant for everybody to reach more folks, as opposed to describing their names and just having a content there.
Exactly. Helping people to be more known. And there's so much awesome stuff out there, but it's just trying to help people to be more aware of that. Now, we didn't do a quick intro. So my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a program manager in the Microsoft 365 platform. We're really good at this. We have scripted intro. And with me as a co-host is, who are you? Who are you, Waldek?
Hi, everybody. My name is Waldek Mastykarz, and I am Cloud Developer Advocate for Microsoft 365 at Microsoft.
Excellent. So let's jump on the interview with Paul, and then we'll come back on the articles right after that. So let's actually get started. Welcome, Paul Bullock, to the PnP Weekly, episode 151. So you've been in the show actually before, but before we go to this week's topic and for the latest focus areas, can you talk about who you are and what you do for a living?
Yeah, so my name is Paul Bullock. So I'm a Microsoft MVP for nearly 2 years now. So I've been doing a lot of sort of development or architecture in the SharePoint space, Office 365 Office 365 nearly 8 years now, so since 2013, and SharePoint nearly 16 years ago, sort of touching on 2003, so I've sort of touched most versions, and things like architecture and development in quite a lot of cases as well. So I sort of built that background up. I'm currently working at CPS as a modern workplace architect, not for too much longer. So I'm changing at the end of the month. So to potentially go back to contracting and have that sort of more development focus and sort of build that up that way.
You mean end of March in this month? So
yeah, end of Feb. Yeah, so I'm
end of Feb. Okay, so
yeah,
because we're recording this on 31st of January, I'm like between of.
That's true. Yeah.
Good. Now, you got your MVPs before. Let's talk about the stuff what you do in community and the latest on that one in a second. But you got your MVP status in it was June 2020.
June 2020, yeah.
During pandemic time. So basically, you've never met anybody and just video streaming and all of that stuff, right?
That is right, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to meet someone eventually, assuming that I continue to keep the MVP status long enough to then go meet someone in person. So, but there are a number of events coming up this year that I'm hoping that will Do you know what? In some respects, I don't really care if I have got the MVP or not. I will try and make the effort to go to conferences and things like that, and meet people that I didn't have an opportunity to meet before. But I've got to try and keep going with that. But I've got plenty of motivation to keep it up, and I quite enjoy being a part of the program. So I've got no reason to change, in that respect.
Now, for those who do not know, we talked about this in numerous times with MVPs. First of all, how do you get to be an MVP? Putting you on a spot, and why does it matter for you? What's the you kind of touched that briefly, but can you talk about that, the impact of being an MVP?
So I didn't expect to become an MVP from the original work that I was doing. So I started out contributing to the PnP transformation tooling. It's got a couple of marketing terms, so modernization tooling, and I was contributing quite heavily because of the project that I was working with, and I think that's where that came from, is my continuous work on that, and blogging and things like that. So I didn't fully expect to be one until I was nominated, which was a shocker, actually. I didn't expect to be considered for that kind of work. I guess in some ways I had a perception as well that being an MVP, you have to be all-knowing, and that kind of thing. And I wasn't sure if I was all-knowing or
secret. Even we as in Microsoft, we're not all-knowing. So
what? Stop giving away secrets.
You know what I mean? There's that perception, isn't there, with it, and all that expectation that when you speak to MVP, that they know everything, they know the answers, and they don't, and surprise, and so I was quite surprised to get that, and then for me, once I started to receive that and started to engage with the program, and then obviously being in COVID times, not being able to meet people in person, but I've been able to speak to certain teams internally and actually start to get to know people and vice versa, which was nice. I think I need to step it up a bit in some ways, because I've got access to a resource. It's just having that opportunity and that space to do that. So there's still plenty for me to grow in that space.
Yeah, and I have to say, positive feedback for Paul, for you, which is really good, that in the NDA calls, so one of the benefits being an MVP is that you get to be in NDA, some of the NDA calls, there's multiple ones and all of that's running. And then where the product group engineering is basically showing potentially what are they planning to do and what's coming and all of that stuff. And Paul is one of the persons who are active and actually vocal on those calls, because unfortunately there's also some set of people, which is understandable, we're different kind of human beings who don't want to jump in and share their opinions because they might be afraid that people are not willing to take that constructive feedback or not. So, but especially with the MVPs, it would be really good that people are vocal, because again, even though we can't fix it right away, but we need to know if something is broken. So
I always seem to have an opinion about everything. I don't know whether I'm heading towards this sort of critique or tech critic, as I was saying earlier. But a lot of the stuff's coming out is cool, and I also want to articulate the positivity side of things. That's something that MVPs don't do enough. Is on these calls and say, hey, that's really cool. I'm looking forward to playing with this, which is good. And I almost wonder if some people need to be the icebreaker between these groups of people, just to start that flow going, and then other people chime in.
It is an interesting point, right? Because like on one, like there are different folks who experience it differently, and like for one, I know that when you hear a new idea first time, it takes, at least me, always time to process it, give it a place, understand how it works, right? So if I just heard something and it's not something that I already need in my work projects and whatever, there's a chance that I will not have an instant feedback on it, because I need time to go through it, right? And that might be also the reason why, like, if you are on this call and you hear something or you share something new, you will not get feedback instantly, because people need to think about it, get back, and maybe in a week they will send you email, ping you in Teams, like, hey, I thought about the thing you showed last week. Here are pros and cons, right?
Yeah,
so that's is there too.
Yeah, I guess that applies actually for in general computer science and computer industry. When you're hearing something, a change is always negative, right? Because you're moving like cheese, or you're introducing something which I was. wait, Waldek, wait. Let me give me my point. So but it's one of those things where people, the first reaction might be always like, or for some people, there's different kind of people, but there are people who first reaction is like, don't change this. Why are you changing this? This is bad. And then there's those who actually, unfortunately, also eat up the air from the room by saying, no, this sucks. Did I say a wrong word? We can do a beeping on that one. Anyway, so but this is a bad idea. You shouldn't be doing this. This is worse. And that the counter side of that one is that when some people then do that, then for those who had positive feedback to share, quite often they feel like, well, I can't share it anymore because the person just basically said it that everybody who would be liking this idea are idiots. So, and that's the industry or human being or discussion, or it's not industry specific even.
No, so I would say debate is an art. It's an art that we are not being taught that enough, I think.
I don't agree with you.
See a lot.
I don't agree with you. No, just kidding.
There you go. And that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine for you to not agree, and I'd like to know why. There you go, right? So, and that is that, right? Like when what you said, like that happens a lot. It happens on social, on teams. Like when there's some there are folks like in any group, there are folks who are active, who have tendency to overwhelm others and take the air out of the room, right? And when they share a first response, it's often very elaborate, it's very extensive. But with that, like other folks have the idea that everything has been already said and they have nothing to add. And that was such a thing. You know, there is nothing more to add. And that really tends to gravitate towards groupthink.
Sure.
Like you have this one opinion, and everybody says like, yeah, plus one to that, and there's like no other arguments, right? So it's really hard to balance it out, and it's really like you need to have moderator in a way who say like, okay, I heard it, I heard you. What other perspective do we have? Correct. Right? To really try to give everybody a voice, and I don't know where I've seen that. I think that was a resource somewhere that I think we shared it even at Microsoft at some point in the last 2 years, where we saw that more and more folks, like more and more meetings are online, and it's harder to ensure, or you need to be more conscious about giving everybody on the call equal chance to speak, right? And that thing, right, to really pay attention, who's talking a lot, who's not talking at all. And to like, hey, call people like, hey, do you have an opinion on that, Sarah or Bob or Bill? You know, to basically give them a stage and acknowledge that they are there and people are really interested in to hearing what they think, and not just have like one opinion, time is gone. Yes, everybody agrees because no one else has anything, right?
Well, there is the opportunity in the chat space, isn't there, where if there is a particular character or characters on your call that are dominating the airtime, the people then go to the chat and think. So when I'm working with customers and I see that happening, I try to call out the person who's making the chat comments and try and bring them into that airtime. Yeah. Just to give them that opportunity to speak, and maybe they don't want to speak, and that's fine. Okay. So call it out, and they go, I don't really want to say anything. That's fine, and then you move on. Yeah. So,
true.
Which is cool.
Anyway, it's interesting human behavior. Now let's talk about a bit more on what you've been actually working lately, Paul, related on the open source and community stuff, because the stuff that you're doing across the M365 platform is really, really cool. Or is it platform because it's more for IT pros, or is it only for IT pros? But anyway, what is it? What are you actually? It's a teaser.
Cliffhanger. Is it? So what is it that you are doing, Paul?
Yes. So I'm currently working on something called script samples. This is a PnP repository where you host your PowerShell scripts, Bash scripts, or in your case, Waldek, you've got some ZX scripts that I've seen that you've committed to the CLI. So it's having those in a space where people can share that, and that space has been launched. It was launched June last year, and it's growing slowly over time, which is absolutely cool. We've also had, in fact, actually, thank you, Waldek, for your support in that. The initial seeding of the script gallery with the CLI scripts was a great place to start and bring that in. And there's been a secondary benefit to that as well. So those samples are now in the solution sample gallery. So if it's not present on there, but what I've done is I've linked back to your original site. So if people do want to know more about the CLI or the samples on the CLI, then they can go to that repository rather than my own. So there's that sort of crossover. So I sort of building that site up, and also the contributors as well have been absolutely awesome. I've got 20. I was just looking at GitHub now. 23 contributors that have posted this, and I'm still getting continuous submissions from people as well, which is good. And it's formulating that pattern and getting to know people and sort of building that up at the moment.
Yeah,
cool.
And the original.
What was the? Yeah, so that was exactly what I wanted to ask. Like, what was the original idea behind? Like, why do we have this single place for scripts?
Well, I had my own library from contracting, so I built up scripts over the years, and I wanted to be able to share those. I was doing it via blogs, and I felt that it was inefficient. Maybe my blogs weren't getting enough traffic, but also I started asking around as well, and then people had their own scripts that they've written for, for their use of either PnP PowerShell, the CLI, or various other tools. And so it's just have that sort of central space where we can sort of pool all of those for scripts. I think a long time ago, a lot of scripts used to be, was it TechNet Gallery, which I think is retired now, where there used to be one space for that. I don't think that's around anymore. But I wanted to also have something under the PnP banner. So I was part of the team, something that I could own as well, which is cool. So I from the work that I've done with the modernization tool, it was Bert's ownership, so it was nice to have something that I own, that I can build. I can use the resource. I can also use it as a way to network as well and connect to people, because I've got this project I want to do. I want to invite contributors. I want to speak to the various other people in the PnP and sort of have that reason to engage with them and things like that. So it was kind of there's a lot of drivers to having that repository, and I use it daily. In terms of what I need a script. What have I got in that library as the first go-to place before I start writing out the scripts? And if I write something out and I've got permission to share it, then it goes up there.
Yeah. So and a few pointers from a background as well, because at some point, I don't know if anybody who's listening to the podcast or watching the video remembers that we actually had PowerShell.office.com site from Microsoft, which had actually decent level of scripts, and the site was pretty okay and it looked nice. The problem of that site was, however, that there was no way for people to contribute. So it was basically, or they will say, you can contribute by sending an email here, which is like, well, that's not how things should be working. So with the script samples, the approach is to take the similar approach as with the other samples, is that you can contribute in GitHub. The beauty of that one is that you can just drag and drop stuff in the GitHub, in the Visual Studio web client, for example, create a folder, create drag and drop stuff in, it will create a pull request, and voila, you're contributing. And rather than, like Paul said, rather than having isolated set of scripts in isolated personal GitHub repos, which nobody can find them, let's actually surface the people and the script across Microsoft Teams PowerShell, Power Automate PowerShell, SharePoint Online PowerShell, Microsoft Craft PowerShell, PnP PowerShell in one centralized location.
Because CLI.
And CLI. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just waiting, like, how many PowerShells are you going to call out?
But really having that one location, rather than, again, it's like, well, there's the one guy in here who created awesome PowerShell script, and there's one guy in here. And the beauty of this one, for sure, is the same. It doesn't matter if you're using the PowerShell script gallery or you go to the unified sample gallery, it surfaces the contributor first. So every single person who contributed is getting acknowledged. So
and that's a vital element to this, isn't there, that you attribute the person that has spent their personal time and made the effort to commit that PR, and you know, I am very thankful for the contributors that I've had on this, and also the continuous work that's going on within it from the contributors. So I tried to make sure that I articulated via Twitter, or they have got these little icons to show their face, and the solution sample gallery takes it slightly one further, where you've got that sort of author view, which kind of thinking of pitching that idea, but you can search for it, so you can type in someone's name and then you can get all their samples, but it's not quite as obvious that that is an option. So but certainly so I might end up pinching that idea, but we'll see.
But it's great to see that well, we know from the past, whenever we introduced PowerShell SharePoint 2010 maybe timeframe, I can't remember, but there's such a tremendous amount of awesome scripts out there, and then in many cases people just forget about them. They don't know that they exist, even though they're openly shared in GitHub. So having this kind of a centralized location makes perfect sense. It's super valuable for the community, for sure. And it's great to see the growing interest. I think the view numbers are pretty decent. They are growing as well, not just decent, they're actually really good. And then the contributor numbers are growing up as well. So, and of course, I have to call out, and I guess Paul would be saying this as well. If anybody has good ideas of even further, let's say, improve the value for the contributors, please let us know, because we're just trying to build a centralized location.
But building on top of that as well, if people have large repositories of scripts and it's not appealing for them to import each one by one, let's have that discussion, because I'm starting to see this. I'm very tempted to write a utility or something that, or even a script to bulk process those into a format where we can get those samples into the repository in bulk. And I wanted to call that because I think that there is going to be a time very soon that someone's going to say, here's 700 scripts. Enjoy. No. So it's like, is it up to the contributor to then write each of the pages? So I want to have that discussion with that person who does want to take that step, and we'll work together on getting that in there.
That's actually really
for good. Folks. For folks who are interested to contribute, like, one, do we have instructions, manuals, video, like what steps they need to go through, and two, do they need to meet a bar? Like, if I can imagine a PowerShell script, like I've seen scripts that are just 5 lines of code and it's there, and I've seen scripts like fully documented following PowerShell specs with synopsis and all arguments, like fully fledged code. Do they need to go either side, or is it like, no matter what you have, as long as it works, it's okay?
Yeah, I try not to box the script in my own standard, because I everybody has their style, everybody has their way of thinking and how they write their scripts. You know, there are many ways of doing the same scripts, and I don't want to be inflexible and saying you have to do it my way, or I'm not interested. You know, I don't want that. I want you to feel open and free to submit your script in your style. But what I have done on the site, there is a contributing area, and it should list out the guide for the the article formats and things like that. I had a recent thought about that on Twitter, and I sort of posted a couple of questions about whether people are finding the lack of definition of submitting for a script in a specific standard a barrier, because they're like, I got a lot of people. I had a sort of theme with some conversations recently about people having this, I just need to polish it before I get it out in the public domain. And like, well, actually, you may be locked into a loop of, is it ready yet? Is it ready? Oh, do I need to do more? Is it, and have that sort of standard. So what I've done is I've put in an optional guide to saying that if you are going to do that, as a minimum, make sure that you've got things clearly labeled, comments, and indentation, so at least it's in a readable format, that kind of thing. It is optional. Like I said, I don't want to put a box on things. I don't want to sort of lock it down and say, if you don't meet that, you're not in. That's not how it works. It is your script you're sharing with it. People can read it eventually, with a bit of work. So so I have that to try and see if that will improve that sort of state if people feel like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you feel, as long as you've checked it works and things like that, then that's absolutely cool.
And that's kind of one of those classic discussions in general in the community work, which is if you collect samples, and is it code or script, it doesn't matter, are you going to have high quality standards and all of that, which will then basically mean nobody's contributing, or are you encouraging people to start the journey of contributing by a bit more lower stress standard and then increasing them, or helping then people with feedback to increase the standards. But one thing, I think one thing what Paul in this is repo and is kind of a demanding also is that there's a clear README file which will explain what the script is doing. Because one of the problems what we keep on having, and this actually applies for many of the samples, unfortunately also for Microsoft, which is, hey, here's a sample in GitHub. Cool, what does it do? Well, pull it down and test it out. Yeah, but why isn't there a screenshot of the sample if it's a actual code? Why isn't there an explanation what the script is doing? Yeah, but it's in the script. But that's not how people find is it useful for them. So trying to make it as useful for other people as possible, and that is a bit more work.
Well, and also with that, right? Like, what is your goal? Is it your goal to share a piece of code on the internet, or is it actually allow others to use it, right? Because if it's the latter, we're currently at the stage where, at least now, search engines cannot deduct the intent behind the code. Like Copilot, nowadays, I've seen a really cool thing, is able to explain, like you paste in a piece of code and it tells you what the code does. Like once we have that, and we can apply it on top of all the code that we share, brilliant. Then that's the day when we no longer need a README, right? Because like you will be able to understand the code just from the code itself. Until we get there, eventually, one day it's going to be the case.
Yes.
Until we get there, we need to have something that explains what is the purpose, what is the benefit, how it works, how you set it up, what are the prerequisites, if any. Images are welcome too. If you want to quickly see like, hey, does that thing produce what I need or not? Because I can look at image and at glance like yes or no. But if it's a script, if it's a page, A4 or more of code, it's like I need to spend quite some time to go through all of it and discern is that the thing or not, right? So like if your goal is to allow others to benefit from the work you've done, you need to do that extra step, which can be as simple as a paragraph of text. What is it for? Like what problem does the thing solve and how to get it to work?
And I'm not necessarily looking for a blog level a description of what it does. But if you do want to provide that, then that's the PnP Tech Community blog is that place to do that, where you can reference, describe the story behind it and the learnings and all that stuff, and then reference a script, because you got to understand that people are just going to quickly want to look for a script. They want to know roughly what it does, and then look at the sample, and then move on potentially next. And there is. I think it's 180 now around that. It keeps going up. I'm not always up to date with the number, but and sometimes it takes a little while to find that, and you don't want to have to read several blocks of paragraphs just to get to the sample. So which is pretty cool. But I do have one rule though with the samples though. So if the script is destructive in any way, so whether it performs a delete operation or deleting assets and things like that, I do put a warning on the README file to say, hey, this script will delete assets and artifacts within your environment. Just make sure that you're happy with that, or run it in the dev environment, that kind of thing. So that's the only thing.
Yeah.
One thing related on this one, because this is a good discussion related on samples and scripts and how things work. So one thing, the kind of a classic question from somebody who's considering maybe contributing is that why do you want to have this in your repo, not from my repo?
That's true.
I have an answer for that, of course.
I don't know if I have a direct answer saying this is okay. I am slightly using the PnP banner with this one. So it's PnP is established. It's well known within the community. I've got a slot on the community calls which I can present a little segment on, which is pretty cool. So it is being advertised. It is being used, and people from the telemetry people are using those samples. So if you want to use that space to have greater reach, and this repo, you feel that this repo would be a better place, then you. But I'm not stopping you from forking the repo and having your own version. I'm just saying that this is one that we're promoting, through the PnP banner, and go from there.
Yeah,
unless you have better. But if you've got a better,
and then there's kind of how would I put it? It's not really compliancy, or it's more community friendly approach related on the samples, which is if we would just surface those locations where the script is right now in the people's personal GitHub accounts. The challenge is that we don't know when that account is going to get deleted or the repo is going to get deleted. Yeah. So that would actually result situations where the sample is listed as an offering in the site or in the unified sample gallery. When you click the sample, it doesn't exist. Or even worst case scenario, you go to the adoption.microsoft.com in the unified sample gallery, you find the sample, you click the link, you will be redirected to the repo, and there's something offensive there. So that would be not something which we would be wanted to happen. And even though the PnP organization, so github.com/PnP is community owned and community contributed and community controlled, it's still a bit related on Microsoft. So Microsoft is one of the people behind the scenes helping on surfacing those samples to be available. So we need to be a bit more careful on that. So because that would be a nice, let's say, Financial Times or whatever story. We went to the Microsoft side and then we opened up a sample and it said whatever super offensive things. So we certainly don't want to have that situation. So
there's been one, I wanted to call out one thing that I really liked as a side effect from the sample gallery is, I've had a couple of contributors actually take, say, PnP PowerShell and write the CLI version of that and vice versa. And what those contributors started to do is find gaps in those respective libraries and then go to the CLI. I think Adam Waldek, for example, has found gaps in the CLI and actually gone and contributed to the CLI and expanded that and then wrote the sample back, which is just, I didn't anticipate that kind of sort of contribution, but it's a super cool way of identifying gaps within that, which is awesome. I love that. I really do.
Yeah. Really, really cool. I'm, by the way, watching the site on one of the screens, and there's so many people who've contributed. Adam Valeras, Jim, Rashmi contributed a lot. Srinivas, nowadays a Microsoft employee, actually. And then so many. Leon Armstrong, Sid Hart, Kasper Poo, and a lot of people who've been, Shandani been really active as well. So a lot of stuff. So it's really cool to see the people. And a growing number of contributors in this side as well, because of course, if we can, as we share the knowledge between others, we can then build the next step of our knowledge and the next step of our knowledge, because we can help and learn from the other people, and rather than, these are my scripts in my GitHub, in my hard disk, I'm not going to share with them with anybody, and then so much better this way. So,
I mean, this is my first community repo, if that makes sense, in my career actually. So I've learned an absolute ton from doing this in terms of being a maintainer, building the sites and working with the contributors. So, but then again, I've had access to some really cool people to leverage their experience. Sorry, the charm offensive there. So it's been really great to actually lean on that, and it's a call out for others actually, if people want to start their own community projects, that there are those within this space that could potentially help you out and help you evolve that idea.
Absolutely, and that's why the GitHub/PnP exists, and that's why it's community owned and code controlled. And sure, we from Microsoft, we're part of the community, so we're part of that as well. But it's not that we want to dictate what the community does, because that's not how it should be. So no. Let's do things together. One thing what I wanted to actually ask, and from a timing perspective, I guess we need to close up. Are you also, Paul, looking into then growing a team related on controlling this, or is this only your baby, or what's the future of the script sample? Well, putting you on the spot under recording.
Do you want an honest answer to that?
I'm not going to be. If I kept it as my baby, it wouldn't scale well. So, and I have to accept that I need to then cross that line. I don't think I'm there yet, because the number, I can cope with the demand that's coming in. well, it's arguable whether I should get someone on board now so I can partner with someone, and then when that grant domains, I can meet it immediately, or whether I wait for that demand to reach, that kind of thing. So, but I'm open to having a team and growing that. And I think that once it might take a couple of years for this to fully seed out and everybody to know what this is about. But I'm open to that. I think it's a learning step just as much as for me, for anybody who's also joining potentially the team as well. But yeah, I'm certainly open to that. I do need to refine some of my processes to make them a bit more shareable, because I've got a lot of stuff run, because I test the generation of the site locally on my machine to see if the sample format will break anything and before it gets published. So and tweak the metadata more than anything. That's what I tend to do a lot, is check the metadata, make sure that it's highlighting the authors in the right way, and it's got those checks and balances for the solution sample gallery as well. So making sure that I've got all the parts in place. So once I guess cloudify that, then I can then scale. That's the best way of describing it.
It's just a kind of a logical next piece and next step on the journey, because we've seen that with the other projects as well. It's like CLI for Microsoft 365, which you Waldek created, but nowadays you're kind of behind of the scenes, and then there's an active team actually contributing and running the show, because of multiple reasons again. But it's one of those interesting steps which then happens naturally with the open source community projects as well, if
not, right?
if you are heading to that direction. It's not that it always happens, but that's then the scalability when it actually starts truly like, oh my God, now there's 10 people actually helping with all of the incoming stuff. Paul, of course, this wasn't really putting you on the spot and saying you should be doing that right away, but it's a discussion point.
Why are you doing this? I mean, what else is? What's going on? Get yourself into shape. Go on. I'm taking a lot of learning from the CLI project. I think that one is spearheading a lot of the way you manage contributors, and I know we've had a lot of discussions about that. So there's tons of learning in the CLI, the way you operate that, which I'm fascinated by.
Really cool stuff. Cool. Any last words? Anything interesting, Paul, on your table this week? So let's do this in this section.
No, I'm just going. I've got a list of issues that I've got in my repo that I might bash through. No,
customer projects.
I haven't. Customer projects. Because I'm winding down from my role, so my workload's getting lighter as I approach that. But I am having to spin up things like my own company and websites and things just to make myself a bit marketable and things like that. So there is some focus on that, but I don't want.
Anybody who's interested in using Paul's services, you should reach out. So.
You get a nice friendly face, cheeky humour. What else?
Isn't that UK humour? So
UK humour, yeah. It probably offends everybody else, but
so Waldek, anything interesting on your table this week? So.
Oh, totally. Always, right? So the last week we shared new release of CLI for Microsoft 365. We started the work on, we are in the final stage for the next major one, which is the V5, which will ship at the end of February, and which will break things. And what we break is a few commands that are
new
based.
Version, of course, it doesn't break any of the older installed versions. Just to be clear. So.
No, of course not. No, of course.
Wrecking ball.
Exactly.
Yes, like
by end of February, we will break you all.
Work anymore? No, we break everything. No. So the new version, if you have a script that you've built in the past and you use it on a V5, it might not work. If you used any of commands that are used on that are based on the Azure AD graph, which will be deprecated, I think, in summer this year, this calendar year, in the northern hemisphere. I guess we need to add that too, because like summer, which summer? In June, July, I think that is the time frame, right? So we already did some work to move away to Microsoft Graph, but that means that there are some differences in the output, input, and all that. So we had to take that step to be ahead of it, so not to wait until the last days. So we're going to do that in V5. And then on top, we're doing some additional work. On one hand, cleaning up the code, but on the other hand, also thinking about new commands, new features that we can add, like the ability to manage M365 apps, which is also an interesting concept. I had an article about that recently. We're adding new commands left and right about anything that is on 365, about managing tasks, getting reports on usage, managing teams and content in teams, anything and everything, really. So that is one. Another one, another thing I'm working on is the idea of quick reference card for Microsoft 365 apps, right? So as we build these apps, like imagine you need to build a bot in Teams. Like there are quite a few moving parts in there, right? You need to have a bot, you need to do things on Azure, you might need to do something with adaptive cards if you want to do SSO. There's also, so there are quite a few things that are involved with it, right? And the best news is that we have resources for all of that available already. Thing is, they're available somewhere. So in other words, we expect you to find them across all of the internet, right? Yes. So it's like, hey, like why not have quick reference cards with all the links in single place, so that you don't need to, like, we don't expect you to open your internet search and go on a journey, but instead you can just open this one thing and you have all the links that you need for this type of app in single place, right? So I build 2 reference cards, I put them in a repo, and now basically trying to solicit input, like, would that be useful? Would that be helpful? What else could we change to improve it? And what's important, like what other types of apps do you build for which you could use them? All right, so like I would appreciate feedback on that from folks. And there are 10 other projects I am involved with, so they will probably come to in the coming weeks.
Yeah, that reminded me, I need to follow up on, even on this recording, follow up on the location for those stuff, but that discussion is ongoing. So it's anyway, so centralized location for that stuff as well. But on my table, Lookbook is coming back online, which is good. Well, Lookbook is aligned, but the provisioning in the lookbook.microsoft.com is going to be enabled again. So it was disabled due to operational and maintenance reasons, but it's now getting enabled again. And then, of course, the Lookbook site for showcasing the art of possible has existed during this time as well. And then 1.14 SharePoint framework went to new preview last week. We'll keep on working on documentation on that one. So there's a lot of cool stuff in there. That was actually kind of a big release. So for those who haven't checked it out, if you go back to check the release notes, it is actually a long list of things. And also we did a new process related on that one where we're pinpointing all of the GitHub issues as well, which are getting actually fixed.
Cool. So that is really cool.
Transparency and clarity on.
And if you have something built on Spfx 113, 112, 110, 111, the easiest way to upgrade that and to try the new version is with CLI for Microsoft 365.
That's
of course.
Cool. I guess that's it for now. We'll jump on a separate coverage of the weekly articles. Thank you, Paul, for joining up.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
As well. Always good to have a chat with you, and looking forward to discussions, NDA discussions later this week, because there's some cool topics actually which are going to go through. And for the external audience, we'll get back to that a bit later. You want to be an MVP to get access on that information. So, right? Okay. Was that? Yes.
Share your stuff today and become an MVP.
That's good. That's good. Anyway, thanks for everybody for watching on the PnP Weekly. We'll jump to the articles and close up the podcast and the video on that side. Thank you, Paul. And
thank you, Paul.
Time. We'll be in touch.
Yep.
Cheers.
And we're back.
Now we're back. So thank you, Paul, one more time. Really good chat and good to catch up as well. Well, we're in touch multiple times in a week anyway, but it's great to have one-to-one discussions and the vision and direction and all of that related on the scripts as well. It's been mind-blowing how well you've been coordinating that work. So spot on. So really awesome stuff, and so much value for the other people in the community. But let's jump into this week's articles, or anything else what you want to say.
What happened in the community?
Yes. let's jump on the articles. So let me share my screen. So here's the one. So let's start with Microsoft news. So we didn't actually have that many Microsoft news across the multiple different blog channels, which we are actually serving. Is that the right way of saying that? But we called out the primary one. So of course, there was one of those is the news related on SharePoint Framework 1.14. So there was a updated public preview on the 1.14. It is currently scheduled to get GA'd in mid-February. So that means in 2 weeks or so. Relatively soon. There's expected to be a one release candidate still, which is already then locked in what's available. And in the blog post, we of course talk about what's available. And what are the new things. So there's a lot of new stuff available, and we call out also in the release notes what are the things which or the issues which have been fixed and all of that, which is super beneficial. One thing what's actually really interesting here is the location-based detection and also functionalities of uploading assets, and that's actually quite important for the corporate mobile portals, which the Viva connection is all about. So having then location-based access to the user's location, you can then show information based on that, and that's actually really cool. So
it is.
So native mobile API access on things and all of that. So it is heading for sure to the right direction, and really cool stuff. And in the actual release notes, quickly pointing out this one, a lot of details related on API changes and things and all of that. So a lot of stuff happening.
Nice. This is very nice.
Good. The other news from the official developer side of the house was Outlook JavaScript API deprecation. I'll call out this one and then we'll jump on your side. So
perfect.
So doesn't I'm on the roll now. So, but in the Outlook JavaScript API, we have deprecated one specific property type. So it's good to be aware of that one if you are using the Office setting APIs. So nothing too special there. Now, the next article was actually another podcast.
Yes. Exactly, right. So there is a Microsoft 365 developer podcast by Jeremy Take and Paul Schaeflein. And this time around, they talked to Nick Charlebois from the Microsoft Graph Spfx team about Microsoft Graph Data Connect. So if you want to know more about it, what it is, what it's for, what is the use case, head on to their site and listen to their podcast.
Yeah, really good discussion, by the way. So good to catch up with Nick on that one. Now, the next article, you'll do actually this one. There's no point for me explaining what's happening in here.
You're free to talk about CLI for Microsoft 365, right? So the other week, we had a release of a new version of CLI for Microsoft 365, version 4.4, where we highlight some of the most noteworthy changes and improvements and features. Right, so the one is support for upgrading Spfx projects to version 1.14.0 beta 5, which you mentioned just now in releases. We have some more comments around Azure Active Directory, Planner, SharePoint, and Teams, as well as some improvements. So with that, I would encourage everybody to give it a try. And if there's anything that you would like us to improve or add, don't hesitate to let us know on GitHub.
Sounds good. The next article was on creating a first adaptive card extension, ACs in Spfx. So these are basically the Viva connection adaptive card extensions, which are exposed in both desktop, but are primarily designed for the mobile experience. But they do work in a desktop experience as well. But Siddharth is basically walking through how to create your first Spfx component as a starting point, and then starting to build stuff. And the ACs were introduced in 1.13, and they will get evolved 1.14, 1.15, 1.16 as well, so which are all scheduled to happen
17, 18, 19, 20.
I think then we're already in 2023. Anyway, so, and the next
Who's
article,
counting?
Exactly.
Next article is from Shruti Shah, and it's about welcoming new employees in teams with adaptive cards. Now, adaptive cards are a really great way to really easily have a piece of UI that works great across any device you work with, right? And in this article, we see like how you can share adaptive cards to teams to welcome new employee or new colleague. So this is a really great way to see, and I guess it's also built with Power Automate Flow, right? So you see a combination of Power Automate Flow, Teams, and adaptive cards to really easily build solution on top of Microsoft 365.
Really cool stuff. Thank you, Shorty, on that one. Now, we also had a new article, another one from Siddharth, how to use Graph Toolkit in Teams app inside of a Teams tab. So basically getting started on that scenario as well. And this is super, super beneficial as a starting point. So using the Yo Teams to create your Microsoft Teams application, or which is targeted for a tab, and then using the Graph Toolkit in there as well. So installing the needed packages and then adjusting the code to actually have the needed settings, and of course the application in Azure and all of that, those permissions. So really very cool stuff. Great reference solution from him. The next one.
Yes, the next article is from Adam Wojcik, and it's about using Power Automate Flow API in Spfx. So that is an interesting article, how you can automate some things around flows from Spfx. Spfx is the model that you can use for building apps for Viva, Connections, SharePoint, and Teams. And with that gives you the ability to really easily interact with any APIs that are secured with AAD, including APIs around Power Automate Flows.
Absolutely. Technically, there's basically the one HTTP endpoint which you're hitting, and then you're initiating that flow to actually get started. But relatively simple. As long as you have the right API permissions and all of that, you can easily do this as well. So
as
really
long
cool
as
scenario.
you know what you need to do, it's all simple. Absolutely.
That is so true. That is so
often
true.
the case, right?
Yes. The next one is from Yannick Rickman. So this one is actually kind of interesting. We talked about this one before we started the recording. So get a full meeting details in a Teams meeting app without the bot SDK. So by default, when you are implementing Microsoft Teams meeting apps, you are expected to have a bot behind of the scenes, which is actually the application which has then access additional details related on meeting. And the meeting ID and the information related on the meeting ID which you get from context doesn't necessarily match the meeting ID which you're expected to use in the bot side, right, Waldek?
Yeah, so actually the meeting ID that you get exposed in the Teams SDK is meant for use with the bot. But if you don't want to use the bot, if you would want to call Graph directly from the web app, you cannot use the SDK, absolutely. Or you cannot use the ID because that ID doesn't match the ID that you have in Graph, at least at first sight, right? Because apparently it's a base 64 encoded string that you can decode, manipulate, and then you get the ID that you can use with Graph. But with all of that, it makes you think like, why isn't there an easier way? And I guess Yannick points also to a feedback that is on the feedback side towards the Microsoft Teams team to basically allow developers to have an easier access to the necessary info to be able to build meetings apps without a bot.
And one thing related on this one, so this one is the meeting ID, and you get access on the meeting information, but it's not accessing the live situation of the meeting. So
exactly. So it's from the invite as opposed to who is now directly in the call.
Correct. Correct. So that is a good point to call out. So it's not that you can access, okay, who's in the call right now through this ID. Yes. Unfortunately, that is not available. So good. And then we had an article from Leon Armstrong. So adding a new board view to Microsoft and SharePoint list using PnP PowerShell and Power Automate. And this is really around this new what's Kanban board,
yes,
way of saying that, which is nowadays supported. And he has a great PowerShell, let's say, analysis or guidance in this blog post, how to create those using PowerShell. So you can easily automate creation of those views to an existing list based on, of course, the listing list situation. So he's adding the needed view using the PnP PowerShell. And actually, here is it? Yeah, invoking the REST and running the REST calls and then setting the view to be available. So really, really cool stuff to automate this kind of a configuration. Good stuff. Now, this one from AC.
Exactly. So there is a new article from Hoitanos About setting up Spfx development environments for multiple SharePoint server deployments. And the point here being is that over time we had SharePoint 2016, 2019, now we have the SE edition, right?
Subscription
and they're
edition.
all, yes, they are all built in different point in time. So as such, they work with a specific version of SPFX. So this article shows you how you can work with different versions of SPFX in parallel, because like oftentimes you might have a customer or a company, or you might have a need to work with a project for SP 2016, 2019, and go back and forth, right? So this article shows how you can work with that without pulling your hair.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting that. And it's actually a good point to call out here that it's using NVM rather than VMs, because VMs, virtual machines, are actually the operational maintenance of them is actually quite high. So NVM gives you the option of having side-by-side multiple Node.js environments, which is really, really cool. It's a really cool article from AC. Then Alex had a good reference blog post related on delete Office 365 group with associated site collection via Graph SDK. These are really useful blog posts because it's like, okay, I need to do X and Y and Z. Oh, there it is. Thank you. I'll just use that one and get moving on the code. So thank you, Alex, on that one. This really is what we talked about, and a lot of the times you're blocking for yourself as a future reference, and this seems like that in the Alex's case for sure.
Yeah.
Then on SharePoints, Peter Vinstra.
Yes, we have a new article from Peter about comparing arrays in Power Automate flows, right? So whenever you have different things to do with arrays in Power Automate flows, this article shows you how you can compare them, work with them, and so forth and so on. So it's a really great nugget to keep in your references, to keep that in mind whenever that use case arises.
Absolutely, really good stuff. And then Mark D. Anderson had a blog post on get all public or private team sites in SharePoint with PnP PowerShell. So as a team site can be set to be private or public, there's a reference PowerShell script, then how to use that and what is the filter of doing that. So it is actually visibility property on the output. So really, really cool reference point from Mark as well. Then we have an article from you.
Yes, exactly. So one of the ideas that I've been working on is the concept of when you build an app for Microsoft 365, like let's say you want to build a Teams bot. Like there are quite a few things involved in it, right? You have the bot, you might have adaptive cards if you want to do SSO. There's also some things included in that. And across the board, you will need tooling, you will need SDK, references, samples, videos. The cool thing is that all of the resources you need are available. Trick is though is that they're available somewhere. So in other words, you need to find your own or the references that you need to do that, right? The current today way to do that. Now, and I thought, like, what if there was an easier way to do it? Like, what if we offered you quick reference cards of sorts that compile a list of all the links and resources that you need to build a particular type of app, showing you the current way of doing it. So with that, not requiring you to go across the internet, find things and try things out, only to find out that reference you're looking at is out of date. Yep. Right? So I shared 2 quick references. And with that, I'd like to know, how can we improve them? Would that be helpful? Is that of any use? And what other types of apps do you build for which you would like to see them? So if you have any feedback on that, I'd love to hear from you, and you can catch me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you are.
Yeah, this is really, really good, and it could have samples as well, and as a chapter. And all of this is keeping it up to date is always the challenge for sure. But these are really, really, really useful for sure. So good stuff. Now, our good friend Paulo had a new video related on managing AAD apps registration with Microsoft Graph. So using the Microsoft Graph APIs to managing those Azure AD application registration permissions and creating those things and adjusting things in the service principal level. So really, really good 6-minute blog post. Sorry, not a blog post, a video explaining how to get things done and what are the API calls and all of that. So that's really, really cool. Then April had a new video.
Yes, new video from April about Power Apps UI, dark mode, light mode toggle, right? So we see a lot of, or a big trend regarding adjusting the UI between light and dark. It can be made to make apps more accessible, or just folks prefer to look at a dark or a light theme, right? And April shows how you can build that toggle in Power Apps.
Really cool stuff. And then the last article is from Shane Young, related on a Power Apps attachment for SharePoint files, images, and signatures, and talks about how you are attaching a file to the Power App, which is quite a common case, because in many cases the company files are in SharePoint or in OneDrive, and then you're attaching those locations, storages, and uploading that then in the app. So really, really good stuff as well. A lot of actually already a lot of use on this one. So Shane is really, really great on explaining the power of the platform, for sure. But that's it for this one. A lot of articles again from both Microsoft and from the community, and of course it's just a short sneak peek of the scratch of the corner. What is it? There's a lot of other articles as well. English is so hard. English is so hard. Anyway, so we already went through what's going to happen on this week. I guess it's time to say goodbye, and we'll be back in a week. It is. So hopefully, and of course, as you are building or writing good stuff in blog posts, please use hashtag PnP Weekly in the Twitter. That's the easiest way for us to catch what you have added. There's so much massive, awesome more articles available in the blog posts, and that it's really, really hard to catch up on all of them. So you can help us with the hashtag PnP Weekly. But I guess that's it for now. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Waldek. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Vesa.
Thank you. And we'll be back within a week. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.